I'm DonTheCrown, and I've been asked a lot lately about 3.7 and the upcoming melee rebalancing on my live stream, so I figured I'd take a moment to read through the latest update here about what they're planning to do and give you guys a little bit of reaction and a little bit of my thought process on like what I'm looking forward to seeing and how I feel about what they've announced so far. So, in Synthesis, they performed an extensive rebalance of spellcasting throughout Path of Exile. A lot of this work was focused on numerical rebalance of most skills. They've indicated that on the June 3.7 expansion, that'll contain a similar rebalance to melee skills, and while they intend to numerically adjust them to make sure they're viable, the actual scope of the melee changes planned is a lot larger than they have indicated so far. Players from other action RPGs have occasionally criticized Path of Exile's melee combat for being clunky, especially early on before players get a lot of attack speed. They're making various experimental changes to the animation system that should help resolve these concerns and really tighten up the feel of melee combat. In addition to animation system improvements and melee skill rebalances, they're experimenting with changes to systems such as accuracy, melee splash, leech, fortify, various ascendancy classes, the passive tree, hit and miss feedback, melee base types, movement skills, and melee damage availability on items. This post has been intentionally light on specific details because pretty much everything can change, and they're going to change stuff for sure, and they'll be giving us more information as we go. But one thing we do know is that Cyclone is now a channeled skill and will have the tag on it, which is awesome because I think it's really great. As like how it is with like in kind of a Diablo 3 kind of feel, where you can like just release Cyclone and you stop cycloning as opposed to clicking somewhere and kind of cycloning to that point. Just feels very strange. So this is a very good first change. And overall, I've been talking a lot lately that if they did a similar skill rebalance in this upcoming league, the melee league, whatever you want to call it, as they did in Synthesis, that would actually be really bad because a lot of the problems with melee right now stem a lot from systems, not 100% just from skill gems. Like, there are a lot of good skill gems out there. They have a bunch of things that are okay about them, but there's just like a lot of things that are just bad about them. For example, like accuracy is a big issue. Something that as a spellcaster or other things you don't need to worry about at all, but accuracy is incredibly important, especially if you plan on going crit, because critical strikes require you to have a lot of accuracy. And the reason for that, and this is coming from the Wikipedia here, is that accuracy measures the chance for an attack to hit. Accuracy-dependent attacks make a second accuracy check to confirm the critical strike. If the check fails, only a normal hit is dealt. And so like an example of that would be if you have 50% chance to hit and 100% chance to crit, in reality, you'd actually hit 50, or you'd miss 50% of the time, hit 25% of the time, and then crit 25% of the time. So this hit chance has like a large impact onto your total damage. And this is why you see most crit-based attack builds getting hits cannot be evaded somehow, some way, whether it's mastercrafted, whether it's on a shield, whether it's being championed. This is very important and provides a lot of damage. So I think fixing that would be really, really great. We'll get back to melee splash here. I think they continue to change leech and how it works. That's really good. Fortify was originally supposed to be like a melee only type of buff that provided more survivability. And since most melee builds aren't going like CI with like 8, 10, 12k ES, I think having some sort of ability to be tanky without being a juggernaut would be really, really nice. Changing around the various ascendancy classes like Slayer, hopefully, Gladiator, even Champion a little bit, Raider, Berserker, maybe even Juggernaut a little bit. I think that would really help make melee feel good and different in a lot of different ways. The passive tree, I think, is also super duper important because we've seen the last few patches, basically the closer on the skill tree you are to this part over here, the Templar area, the more action and updates there have been. We've gotten things like Spiritual Aid, we've gotten all sorts of new nodes over in this way, brands have been reworked and put up in here, a whole bunch of stuff. But over in this part of the skill tree on the like almost exact opposite side, there's been almost nothing new added. And there's a lot of room for updating and fixing and making new, some stuff over here. So I'd love to see some additional buffs in terms of damage and also in terms of life. Like, it's very difficult sometimes as a ranger, for example, to go pure life because there's just not enough life on the tree, and going all the way over to Constitution is pretty much mandatory in those builds, and then you still don't have enough life, which in my mind feels really bad, especially when it's easy to get like enough flat life on other builds if you're doing non-melee. But that's hopefully one of the things they're looking to do here with that. I'm not really sure about the hit and miss feedback. This would be kind of interesting. I feel like once you get enough attack speed, you don't really notice your misses anymore. Melee base types, I'm not sure if that means like the weapons or anything. Movement spells would be really, really nice because right now we have Leap Slam, Whirling Blade, Shield Charge, and Charge Dash. And that's like a decent amount of skills, but you're kind of limited. Like Leap Slam, I think, is head and shoulders above all of those other skills right now. Feels really fast, goes over walls. However, if you're using a claw, using a dagger, you're unarmed, you can't use it. So it's pretty much like use Charge Dash or Flame Dash as a spell, which feels really terrible. And so overall, a little bit of rework would be done. And then melee damage availability on items is kind of like both a blessing and a curse to melee. Like, melee is one of its greatest strengths is that you can have these amazing, insane, like mirror tier weapons that provide an incredible amount of damage to your build. However, if while you're leveling you don't have a decent weapon at all, your damage drops off incredibly hard, especially where you're leveling. This is super noticeable, especially as a new player. Like, if your weapon's now like 10, 12, 15, 20 levels old, it just feels terrible. Compare that to spells where you can literally take a Act 1 that's +1 lightning and storm brand your way into maps. It doesn't feel good, right? Especially as new players, like, I would be really confused by the huge differentiation there. Now, if we go back to things like Melee Splash, I think Melee Splash and Ancestral Call become kind of mandatory on a lot of builds. And I've kind of like gone through and I've played a lot of skills so far in the game, and I've killed Uber Elder with a ton of skills. Like, this is my champion boss killer. I've done it for a few leagues now, and in the Delve League, I really went out of my way and I tried to kill Uber Elder with as many different skills as possible, especially while we still had stat sticks. It was absolutely insane. But I kind of grouped the different skills into different sections. So this first section here, these first 11 skill gems that I've killed Uber Elder with, I feel like 100% of the time, if you want to have good pack clear, that you have to have, let me kind of get my head out of the way here, you have to have Melee Splash and Ancestral Call for the most part to make this feel good. And so these things like Glacial Hammer doesn't feel good without that, even though there's kind of a threshold jewel for this. Like, just feels so much better once you have Ancestral Call or Melee Splash. Heavy Strike, like, don't even try to play the game with Heavy Strike without having Melee Splash and Ancestral Call. Vigilant Strike, look, I know this is not supposed to probably be a main skill. I've killed Uber Elder with it anyways, and I've like done tier 16s. It feels okay, especially if you can get endurance charges to make it work. Dominating Blow doesn't really necessarily feel like a primary skill. Infernal Blow feels great once you can get things popping in packs, but if you're not using Ancestral Call and Melee Splash, it doesn't feel good. Same thing with Puncture. Stack Strike's kind of weird. Dual Strike, Flicker Strike, Double Strike, and Frenzy. And then you kind of have some melee skill gems that are kind of okay, but kind of need a little bit of a buff. Like Ice Crash feels kind of great for bossing, but then also the area effect on it feels really terrible. And like, honestly, Consecrated Path just crushes it in every single way. Cleave, Ground Slam, Smite. These could, like, honestly, I think could all use a little bit of work. And then you have like melee skills that aren't necessarily melee skills, like Molten Strike, Frost Blades, Spectral Throw, Wild Strike. Some of these like want to scale projectiles. Some of these kind of have all sorts of stuff. And yes, I'm throwing Spectral Throw in here as well because it kind of like gears out in a similar way to a melee build. And then you have movement skills that are also damage skills. I've killed Ubrella with both of these, and they both feel pretty good. And honestly, I think Cyclone's going to feel amazing next league, but hopefully they don't nerf it again. I even killed Ubrella with Leap Slam. Leap Slam has really decent damage, actually, but I could definitely see them like making it more available to more classes and probably reducing the damage on it. And then last but not least, the skills that like I think are pretty good and consistent in the meta, like Lacerate, Reeve, obviously with Vol Reeve, Consecrated Path, Tectonic Slam, and then you have like the king of actual melee single target, which is Blade Flurry. And Blade Flurry feels really cool and feels like you do a crap load of damage, but honestly it's head and shoulders above every other melee skill. Yes, I know Molten Strike is very, very good for single target as well. It's like a little bit weird because you're scaling projectiles and everything. But Blade Flurry like used to cover a huge area, and then when you released it would blast. I would love to see this like scaled down a little bit on the single target, but then be more viable for a map clearing. Honestly, in my build, I just switch out 2 Lore Weaves, like 1 Tectonic Slam Lore Weave and 1 Blade Flurry Lore Weave, and that's just the easiest and fastest way. It would be nice to just have to switch concentrated effect and increased area effect on this one skill and just be like a pure Blade Flurry build. But that's kind of just like my general thoughts about these different skills. It would be nice if they put Melee Splash into the passive tree so that you could just, you know, as a key node here, like, as opposed to like Crimson Dance, which is currently pretty weak. Let's not even get talking about how bad bleeding and poison ailments are right now. But if it was just like, hey, your attacks splash now, that would be really amazing. And in general, like this whole area of the tree, I think could use a little bit of rework because I don't really see people take these nodes very frequently. And two-handers in general, hopefully get a major rework. But kind of what they're talking about is with the animation changes and these melee splash changes, it sounds like to me they're going to help fix some of these gems' main problems. Because with Glacial, I mean like Glacial Hammer, that's always a good example, would be like Double Strike. Double Strike, you pretty much need to have Ancestral Call, Melee Splash, and Multi-Strike. And all 3 of those gems have a less damage multiplier on them. That feels really bad if like your base skill, like Frenzy even for example, or even Flicker Strike, all of these have, you know, 4 gems locked in to make the skill work, to make the skill feel good. That's just feels like bad design, and hopefully this is something that they're going to be addressing. I'd really love to see like Melee Splash like off of like a skill gem and like onto the tree, or both. Like I always knew Slayer was fun because you could pick up the Melee Splash, but the way that they've designed the tree like for Slayer also makes it so you really can't take Melee Splash anymore in the tree. And so it'd be nice for them to fix kind of some of those problems. Also maybe like dialing down like how fast you need to get your attack speed going to really have it feel good. My current Tectonic Slam guy in Synthesis League attacks 14 times a second. It's just a little ridiculous, but I'm not even like focusing on attack speed or anything like that. So it like can get up there, and like if it takes that fast for the skills to feel good, that's kind of a bad thing in my opinion. And like the fact that pretty much every non-channeled skill wants to use multi-strike is kind of a bad thing in my opinion. Like Spell Echo was very popular for a long period of time. Now we don't have Spell Echo anymore as like a primary gem that every single self-casting person has to use. And hopefully they take kind of this approach with melee as they did with spells. Things I don't want to see though is I don't want to see every single skill turn into kind of like an elemental hit where you care less about getting good gear and having like a nice synergy of nice items as gem level mattering. I think gem levels helping out the leveling process is kind of nice, but when it's kind of like the end game goal is you get that like level 31 elemental hit or something like that, to me that's really silly. And I don't necessarily think that would be a healthy way for the game to go, because I really enjoy still like getting a lot of awesome weapons that help out with your attack speed, critical strike, and it always feels like you can always push your damage a little bit farther with melee, which I don't really get that feeling as much with spells. But in terms of my thoughts, like, that is how I feel with this. I think I'm very excited about what's going on, because it seems like they're putting a lot of focus on a lot of different aspects of melee, and not just, okay, increase the numbers. And this is like why I've always been excited about GGG, because they're very like straightforward. Here's what we're working on, here's what's going on, and seems like they're making some awesome decisions and balance changes, and they're like very like cognizant of how the game is right now. So hopefully we'll get some more information soon. But if you want to catch me live, I'm playing Melee still. Probably playing some other things this league, but you can catch me at twitch.tv/DonTheCrown. And I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you very much.